So, as a game designer, you don't design fun. You design the machine that creates fun. Most people go around and they say, I'm going to make my game fun. We need more fun games. What the hell even is fun? You know, you can't directly grab fun and put it into a game. Hell, you can't really pick a single piece or mechanic or system in a game and say, yes, this mechanic is fun. We as designers or game developers, we control the game. We decide the rules, the goals, the feedback, the surprises, the choices, the problems, the rewards, failure, challenges. And this thing called fun, right, which is pretty abstract, opinionated, it could differ from individual to individual. It arises, right? It's an emergent phenomena that arises from all those things. So the question really isn't how do I make fun? Saying I'm going to make a fun game is like saying I'm going to be happy or I'm going to achieve happiness. I'm going to learn to be happy. Happiness, fun is not objective. It's not a real concrete thing, all right? So the better question as a game developer, if you really want to be successful, you need to ask yourself, what game structure will create the experience I want to share with the world? What game structure will express the feeling inside of me outwardly? All right, like what do you want to experience emotionally? Because at the end of the day, life is emotions. We just feel emotions. We have thoughts. We have opinions, and each carry an energetic emotional charge. Why do you think people don't do the things they really destined to do? Because their emotions are like, nah, that's uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Our emotions are powerful. If you notice, a lot of people don't argue based off logic. If you're really a logical person, you start to notice how emotional and illogical people are, and you realize that emotions really rule the world. Okay? So all in all, we don't actually design fun, okay? You know, people go on saying like, oh, I want the player to feel powerful, I want the player to feel scared, I want the player to feel curious, I want the player to feel addicted. But here is the problem: all of these experiences are not concrete, they're all emergent. All right, you cannot touch any of these experiences directly. Like, you could sit down and create a horror game and not make anything scary that makes anyone feel that pressure. A lot of these horror games are supposedly horror game end up being like these action games. You know what I'm saying? Not actually scary. So you can't touch any of these experiences directly. You can't open your code base and drag in a script called fun. You can only touch the game. Another way to think about it is this: you are a sculpture, right? The game is clay. The experience you wish to express, the emotion you want the player to feel, rises out of it, just like it rises out of the clay when the player interacts with the game. You cannot design fun directly. You have to design the machine that produces fun. Fun is not a feature. Fun is the smoke coming out of the machine. Your job is to build the machine. All right. So if you think about it for a little bit, like, the game is clay. A sculptor cannot touch beauty directly. They touch clay, they push it, they cut it, they shape it, they smooth it. A game designer is the same way. You cannot directly sculpt excitement, tension, curiosity, or even mastery. All right, you sculpt rules, goals, control, rewards, enemies, levels, feedback, numbers, timing. All right, these are the things within your control. Fun is not within your control. All right, the player touches and interacts with that structure you create. The experience emerges like how our consciousness emerges out of our brain. Okay, the player feels the experience, but the designer shapes the game. All right, a game is an object that creates experience, because remember, a game really isn't a game. A game is an experience that the real world lacks. People are lacking, right? Reason why a lot of these AAA games are terrible is because they don't provide an experience. They provide more of the same that we experience in our day-to-day lives. All right, some of these live service games are the same as a job. All right, the same as a job. And guess what? Your hard work is meaningless once the next live service game comes. And then it's like, did your efforts even matter? The same way an employer just throws you away after years of slaving away because they're like, we don't need you no more. And they're like, whoa, what I do with my life, right? So when it comes to building a game, a lot of people focus on the game, but you really have to focus on the process of making the game. You have to be like a craftsmanship, a craftsman. So one of the most important things you really have to lock in are definitions. A lot of people hear the words define a game and they're like, boring, I don't want to learn. They think it's academic nonsense. And you know what? You're right, it is. But guess what though? I'm here doing the work for you and just making a video for you. Instead, if you want to know where I got all this shit, you could go read the direct source. It's called A Book of Lenses, Game Design, or something like that. Game Design, A Book of Lenses. This is where I'm getting this shit from. So if you want to read the source and not listen to me, go read it. But anyways, defining things is not about like vocabulary. It's just sharpening your thinking. You can't be afraid to think, man. Use your brain. Yes, it's effort, but it's like going to the gym. You want to get to the point where your brain has a six-pack abs, okay? The issue is that you can't see it. I mean, you can experience it though. Like, you definitely know when you're getting sharper and smarter and you're elevating, but you got to do the work, Get your brain is a giant massive muscle. Get a six-pack abs, 8-pack if you can. But anyways, when you define fun, right? You're really asking, like, the question you should really be asking is, what am I trying to create? What will make that work? What makes it fail? What does the player actually care about? The goal is not a dictionary argument. The goal is to be a better designer. Emphasis on a designer. Listen, a game developer is a dime a dozen. A game designer, a true genuine game designer, is hard to come by, okay? You could build your own studio, you'd be the captain of your own ship. But the point of really sitting down and defining things and making things concrete though, is just to force your brain to think clearly, okay? So how would I go around saying what the hell's fun? To me, fun is pleasure with surprises, okay? And I think that's the most simplest definition for fun. So what counts as a surprise? What counts as predictability? Predictability is monotonous grinding, all right? Same enemy, same reward, same attack, same outcome, same rhythm, all right? Imagine if you get the same loot as well. No surprise means your brain becomes smooth like a koala brain, all right? Listen, it's 2026. Everyone is a dopamine fiend, all right? The reason we like short form content is because every video is like a sparkle. No one's really comprehending or digesting short form content. Like, literally, like, do like an hour-long session and really in the comments write down like what you remember from the hour-long session of videos. Chances are you don't even remember. It's a blur, all right? So predictable gets very stale. Surprise keeps us alive, all right? So how does like surprise work, and how does the player get surprised? All right, so the surprise can exist in any behavior: loot drops, sound effects, animations, level layout, combo systems, player choices, opponent decisions, hidden interactions. If we were to use like a Pokemon style game, you use a fireball and the enemy loses 10 HP. That's a regular, boring, normal attack, right? But, if you use like an entity component system, you could do something interesting. This is why data-oriented programming is definitely the way. You could do cool things like you could use the fireball, right? And if the enemy is wet, it creates steam, right? Which can be an additional damage. So Hell, the Steam can even create a fog, right? You can have lots of interesting combinations with an ECS system in your game. So you can have lots of cool combos, all right? But this is the thing though. The same way there is feature creep and systems creep, as long as you define things and you hone in on the emotions, you can really sit down and build all these surprises. But these surprises are working in unison. Think of like a factory. Everything has its role. It's all focused on one thing, serving the mission. Building a game is not building a game, okay? If you build a game, you probably are not going to be successful, because the thing that differentiates the successful developers from regular developers is that most developers, they build a game. That's not what people want. People don't want a fucking game. There's hundreds, thousands of fucking games on Steam, on the App Store. They don't care about games, bro. It's oversaturated. But what isn't saturated are experiences, okay? Unique experiences, all right? If listen, the two most common genres of platformers is platformer, roguelike, and one of those narrative story driven game. Listen, your story is not enough, bro. You have to think. You don't. If you really want to write a story, go be a writer. Okay. Really, as a game designer, you're like a roller coaster developer. All right. If you go on some roller coasters you don't feel shit. But when you go on a good roller coaster, bro, you feel that. You feel present, all right? Some roller coasters are boring as hell and you're like, whatever. But the good ones, bro, like, you locked in. So you kind of have to be like that. You have to lock in on the experience, man. You can't have the player in their head analyzing. They are the game, If you think about it spiritually, professional basketball players, right? Is Michael Jordan, is LeBron playing basketball, or is basketball playing LeBron? Like, think about it. LeBron goes into the court, right? And he locks in and he's ready to play. Who presses play? Does the game of basketball press play under the LeBron script, or does LeBron press play on the basketball script? It might be both, man, because that's the thing. That's reality. The player plays the game and experiences the game, right? But then the game, I'm getting lost in this, but ultimately, it's all about unity. The player plays the game and forgets themselves, and the only way you can really do that is by really honing in on an overwhelming experience that overrides their present reality and, for the most part, the normalcy of everyday life in society. So, what even is play, right? I would say, according to the book, play is curiosity with your hands. A powerful way to think about play is manipulation that satisfies curiosity, right? The player wanders some things. They ponder, they poke the game and they find out what happens if I press this, what happens if I do this, what happens if I attack the enemy, what happens if I attack this way, what happens if I combine these items, what happens if I go to that cave, what happens if I break the rule. That is play. Curiosity creates questions. Manipulation creates the answer. One thing I would definitely say, what a lot of you adults, I am an adult too, but like what I mean by this is, though, a lot of y'all got lost in the sauce of life and society, and y'all start saying shit like, I'm too grown for this, or like you see someone careless and you're like, well, are you 5? You get judged, and that's terrible for a creative. As a creative, you are an eternal child. I don't mean like, those people that have trauma and they're like 5 years old. No, bro. But like the sense of freedom, of like color in the world. You know what I mean? Like the sense of color, ponder, and sense of awe is still there. You know, as a child, life is very colorful. As adult, I would definitely say shit gets gray. Some people get so boring. They start placing these rules like I can't behave this way because I'm blah blah blah. You know, and then you get lost in the sauce, and now you're this concept of an adult. And guess what? You can't do shit or everything fails, bro. Like, I mean, some people are still successful, but if we're trying to make things not into a lottery and make it into an actual process for success, right? Listen, children are closest to the divine. They're the closest to source, all right? Their egos haven't formed. They are closest to their true selves before they have trauma and pain that we all go through, and then they put on masks and become these adults. A lot of these adults have masks on. You don't know who they really are. Sometimes they behave a certain way to be accepted. That's just how we are because we live in a society. And then you lose yourself. And if this facade, if this mask you put on is trying to create art, it's going to fail because it's not real. And the worst part, if you go too long wearing this mask and acting, you become that, and now you kind of fucked, and you might have to go to therapy or something to recover what you've forgotten about yourself. You know, you get so caught up acting, you become that, and that's tough. And that might be one of the reasons you might be failing at your creative pursuits. But one of the best ways, though, is start asking why, and start searching and asking AI, why is this way? One of the best way to really reclaim your inner child is just be curious about everything. Be curious. A lot of people, they shut down their curiosity, or some people get annoyed, you know, like, why are you asking too many questions? But like, no stupid questions, you know. Ponder, be curious, you know, be a little wacky. You need that curiosity. You need to invoke that curiosity, all right? That's where the surprises come, all right? One of the other important thing is your game needs to plant questions, you know? The player should have questions in their mind. It should be questions, not assumptions. If the player has assumptions, that's kind of fucked. But questions like, can I beat this? Or what's behind this door? What happens if this creature evolves? Can I survive one more night? You know, a bored player is often just a player with no questions they care about. You know, your job is not to give these players goals, but it's really to make them care enough about the game to ask questions while they play. You know, to get them entranced, entangled, and invested. All right. And so we have to think about, what is a game? A game ultimately is playful problem solving, you know? It's problem solving approach with a playful attitude, okay? Because, you know, every game needs a problem. The player's there to resolve, to solve, you know? How can I win this? How do I survive? How do I get more points? You know, how do I build a better team? Even a cozy, simple game says, how do I decorate this space better? How do I make this space fit my character more, or my personality? How do I make my farm more efficient? The problem gives the player something to chew on, all right? The player needs something to chew on when playing the game. You know, the player attitude makes it feel voluntary instead of like work, which is an issue with these live service games. They prey on people's like addictive tendencies and primal urges, you know. We're trying to create holistic, good games, all right? Not another generation of fiends, okay? So, ask yourself, before sitting down and just building the game in your head, right? Because you might have a picture, you might have an image, but we got to make this concrete. You know, someone can have a masterpiece in their head. An architect can imagine a building in their head. Do you think they just start building the building? They plan, All right, you need to blueprint. You need to figure out the logistics, the materials. You know, you need to ask yourself, like, what problem does your game ask players to solve? You know, how, for a platformer, it could be, how do I reach the end without dying? RPG, a tactical RPG is, how do I win with such limited moves? A roguelike is, can I still win even though I have bad luck? For a deck builder is, man, how can I turn any set of cards, right? How can I come up with a game-winning engine no matter what cards I'm dealt, you know? Because now, with these questions, every mechanic either gives the player a tool, creates an obstacle, changes the problem, or resolves solving the problem. You know, mechanics are interesting when they change how the player solves a problem, you know? Listen, you are not a one-dimensional being. You're not a two-dimensional being. You're not a three-dimensional, four-dimensional. Doesn't matter. Listen, don't limit yourself. Use different perspectives, you know? Change the dimensions of gameplay. Do not ask, what mechanics should I add? Ask, what problem am I making more interesting? Add some season, you know? You don't need to boil up your game. If you're cooking up a game, are you going to boil your game? Fuck no, bro. You're not going to boil a game. If your game is a nice meal to serve to people, are you going to boil it? No. Are you just going to give me plain ingredients? No. You're going to chop shit up. You might source better ingredients. You might source certain mushrooms or tomatoes or meat from a certain country, right? And then you might marinate. And guess what? All of this, you might marinate. You might use a special type of salt, a special type of water, a certain type of aged balsamic vinegar, a special thing from a special certain region. And it all adds up at the end of the day. Like, it could be two different things, and one meal mogs the other meal. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, the next thing is, why do some game rewards like feel worthless, right? Like, let's say everything is right on paper, but it still feels worthless. It's usually because, you know, the game doesn't make the things within it valuable. You know, Monopoly money matters inside Monopoly. Outside the game, it's just paper. Rings and Sonic matter because they protect you and they help you earn extra lives. But if a collectible gives points that do nothing, players stop caring. One of the greatest sins that exists are potions and are just fucking potions, right? Potions, health items, stat items. Truth be told, a good game forces you to use them. Like, you cannot, like, I think a truly well-designed game forces the player to use those items. Like, you cannot progress without using your potions and whatnot. Because for the majority of the games I've played, I just rack them up, man. I rack them up, or money becomes invaluable. Or, like, you know, or like, I have this money, there's a blacksmith, but then the stuff I can buy is so worthless compared to like anything I could find out in the world. You know what I mean? Like, there's no weight to a lot of these things. They build them, they create them just because they're tropes, and they're like, this is just what these games have. But there actually isn't any weight to any of that shit, you know? The item exists, but it has weak value, you know? But so what you should really do is stop following trends and tropes and just focus on what experience you want the player to feel. How can we make everything serve that experience, all right? Is it survival, power, status, collection, progress, expression, winning? Make your rewards connect to that motivation. Lock in. Like, if you want the player to feel powerful, fuck it. Money is power. Yes, you could, listen, if you have bad luck, guess what? Buy yourself to some good items. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, if your luck is shit in a game, those ultra rare weapons, bro, get a job in the game, make that money, just buy it. You know what I mean? Like, money is power. Make the player feel powerful in each and every way, in different manifestations, you know? Players don't care about the points. They care about what the points mean, you know? People don't care about it's just digits. People care about high scores because they're a status symbol. All right. So like imagine you have two platform games. In one game you collect random items for score, but the score does nothing to help you survive, right? It does not unlock anything. It does not change your strategy. Imagine you played Sonic and that's just how you collected rings. Eventually the player is just going to stop collecting rings. They're not going to care, all right? It's just noise. In another game, which is actually Sonic, the rings protect you from damage to help you earn extra lives. They directly support your goal. So what is the player going to do? They're going to go and collect the rings, all right? If the reward does nothing to help the player achieve their goals, it's just decoration, all right? In a lot of games, items, currency is simply decoration. It's there for the world building. It's there because the genre says this genre has these things, but ultimately it is worthless and weightless. It's empty noise and baggage. That's how you end up with a game that looks correct on paper, and you're like, I did everything, but it's still uncanny and weird. All right. So to wrap things up, you gotta ask yourself, like, what experience do I want to create? What can I control in the game that helps me achieve this experience? Now, while also staying focused on the experience, how can we surprise the player? What questions can we invoke within the player? What problem is the player solving? How can we make everything filled with lots, like, valuable, filled with weight? You know what I mean? What mechanics makes the experience felt? You don't prototype the entire whole game. You prototype the experience producing machine, all right? Focus on a small segment. Ask yourself, what is the player going to be spending the most on this game? And get that game loop. Focus purely on the game loop, not the entire game, not the narrative. On the entire loop of the game, all right? And lock it into perfection. Polish that one loop to perfection, all right? Get it perfect. That's all I gotta say. Bye.